Hello everyone, Shinto Bean here, and in this video we'll be taking a look at the fourth and final commander deck in this 40k Magic crossover, and this is the Forces of the Imperium deck, which is made up of many sub-factions including Space Marines, Astra Militarum, the Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Mechanicus, the Inquisitors, and many others that I can't remember off the top of my head. This deck largely revolves around making lots of tokens and overwhelming the enemy with sheer force of numbers. And for this video, I decided to do something special and actually show you the models alongside the creature cards to show you which models from the tabletop they actually base the cards off of. And I really wish I'd had this idea before making the first 3 videos, because it actually gives you a pretty good idea of how well the card represents the tabletop counterpart, which I think they actually did a pretty good job of with this deck specifically. Not quite as well with the other 3 decks, but let's get right into it and start off with the 2 possible commanders for this deck. The first is Inquisitor Greyfax. For 4 mana, she is a 3/3 with Vigilance, so she doesn't tap to attack. She has 2 abilities. The first one is a global buff that gives all other creatures you control +1, +0, and Vigilance. And her second ability, Hunt for Heresy, you pay 1 mana and tap her to tap target creature an opponent controls, and then Investigate, which creates a clue token, as you can see on the right, which is an artifact that you can sacrifice when paying 2 mana to draw a card. And these clue tokens actually combo with another major character, Belisarius Call, who will show up a little later, so keep that in mind. The other option for commander in this deck is Marneus Calgar, and again for 5 mana he is a 3/5 with double strike, and he also has 2 abilities, Master Tactician, which allows you to draw a card whenever 1 or more tokens enters the battlefield under your control, which is really strong. That is an amazing ability in this deck because you're constantly making these creature tokens, like the Space Marine here you can see on the right. That's his other ability. For 6 mana you can create 2 of these guys, which are 2/2s with Vigilance. And there are tons of other cards in the deck that give you tokens, including Greyfax, actually. Those clue tokens also count towards this as well, even though they're not actually creatures. So, some pretty crazy combos in here. Now, let's take a look at some of the squad cards in this deck. There are quite a few of them, and these guys all have the ability to create a unique token, which is a copy of the card that created it, so they all have some sort of additional ability. In this case, the Vanguard Suppressor is a 4 mana for a 3/2 with flying, and its ability Suppressing Fire allows you to draw a card whenever it deals combat damage to a player. So for each 2 mana that you pay in addition to the casting cost, you can create another token copy of this card. It can be quite powerful late game. Next up is the Space Marine Devastator. This is 4 mana for a 3/3, and its special ability Grav Cannon allows you to destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment when it enters the battlefield. And again, for each one that you summon in addition to the original one, you can destroy potentially multiple artifacts or enchantments. Next we got the Arco-Flagellant. This is 3 mana for a 3/1 with Squad 2. It cannot block, and it has an ability called Endurant, where you can pay 3 life to make it indestructible until end of turn. Not super amazing, but it creates tokens, so I guess that's good enough. Then we got the Ultramarines Honor Guard, 4 mana for a 2/2, which gives all other creatures you control +1/+1, and this also has Squad 2, so you can create multiple copies of this guy, and all of a sudden you're getting a massive buff to your troops. We got the Zephyrim, 4 mana for a 3/3 with flying and vigilance, and this one actually has a miracle cost, so if it's the first card you drew that turn, it actually only costs 2 mana to play. And then you can also create additional copies with the squad, so that can potentially be really good. And then the last squad card is the Sicarian Infiltrator, 3 mana for a 1/2 with flash, so you can play it on your opponent's turn, and you draw a card when it enters the battlefield. And again, you're drawing cards for each additional copy that you summon through the squad. This one should have a token card, but for some reason they didn't preview it in the video, so don't really know what it looks like yet. And then we got Inquisitor Eisenhorn. He can also create a token, but this is a kind of special one. It's actually a legendary token, so you can only have 1 out on the field at a time, and the only way you can get it is by revealing The first card you draw each turn, and if it's an instant or sorcery, you get the token, which is a 4/4 with flying. He also has an ability to create clue tokens when he deals combat damage to a player. You can investigate that many times, but he's only at 2/3, so actually getting him to deal that combat damage to the player could be a little bit tricky. And then we have some cards that combo very well with mass creatures, especially with the mass tokens that you can create in this deck. So first up is Commissar Severina Rain, 3 mana for a 2/2. Her first ability, leading from the front, makes each opponent lose X life, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Pretty good ability. The second ability, Summary Execution, you pay 2 and sacrifice another creature to gain 2 life and draw a card, and you can use that multiple times in the same turn. Next is the Epistolary Librarian. This is 4 mana for a 3/4, and its ability Veil of Time also activates when this guy attacks. It allows you to cast a spell with mana value X or less from your hand without paying the mana cost, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Now this is a little confusing to me because normally in the combat phase you can't actually play most spells like creatures or sorceries, enchantments, artifacts and stuff. So the only thing I would think that you could actually play with this are instant spells, but I could be wrong, so someone with more magic knowledge, please let me know how this card is actually supposed to function. And then we got the Sanguinary Priest, 4 mana for a 2/4 with lifelink, so you gain life equal to the damage it deals. And its special ability, Blood Chalice. Whenever another creature you control dies, this dude deals 1 damage to any target. Again, comboing very well with tokens. And then we get into many other cards that can create more generic tokens, like the Thunderhawk Gunship. This is 6 mana for a 6/6 flying artifact vehicle with crew 2. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 Space Marines with Vigilance, and when it attacks, it gives all creatures you control flying until end of turn. We got Belisarius Call. The artwork is nice, but it doesn't really capture how big the guy actually is. 4 mana for a 2/4. He's got 2 abilities. The first one, you can tap him and then tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to create a 2/2 Space Marine with Vigilance. And you can use the clue tokens, for this purpose. His second ability, Master of Machines, you tap him and then tap X untapped creatures you control to look at the top X cards of your library. You can reveal an artifact from among them and put it into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library. So I can't actually remember off the top of my head how many artifacts there are in this deck, but it does have some potential. This is one of the artifacts, the Inquisitorial Rosette, I'm assuming of Greyfax, 2 mana, and you can equip it for 3 mana. And whenever the equipped creature attacks, you create a 2/2 Space Marine token with Vigilance that's attacking. And then attacking creatures gain Menace until end of turn, so they have to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. And then we got some spells that can create token creatures. So Deploy to the Front, this is a pretty expensive sorcery at 7 mana, but you create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So if your opponents have a lot of stuff on the board, you can get an entire army of these soldiers. This is one of the soldier tokens. All the tokens in this deck look amazing, by the way. This is the Death Core of Krieg. Next we got Entrapment Maneuver, which is a 4 mana instant, and it forces target player to sacrifice an attacking creature, and you create X 1/1 white soldier tokens, where X is that creature's toughness. Now this is a little tricky, but because I believe your opponent gets to choose which creature to sacrifice. But you can potentially create a lot of soldiers with it, and the token on the right is one of the Catachan Jungle Fighters. We've got Martial Coup, which is a sorcery for 2 white, and additional X in its casting cost. You can create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, and if X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So it can potentially be a board wipe that creates these soldiers as well. And on the right is a Cadian soldier. We've also got the Company Commander, 4 mana for a 2/4 with 2 abilities. The first one, Command Section, creates a number of 1/1 white soldiers equal to the number of opponents you have. And then the second ability is a little bit ridiculous, Bring It Down. When this guy attacks, creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn, so every single one of your soldiers can suddenly destroy any creature. We got some more spells here to launch. The Fleet is a reprint card with new artwork. It's 1 white mana, but it costs 1 more colorless to cast for each target beyond the first. And until end of turn, any number of target creatures basically spawn a 1/1 soldier creature token that's tapped and attacking when they attack. So of course you want to use it on your own dudes, and you can get a bunch of attacking tokens. This is a new one, Defenders of Humanity. It's an enchantment that costs 3 mana plus an additional X to cast, and when it enters the battlefield, you create X 2/2 Space Marines with Vigilance. And then it also has another ability. You can pay actually the same cost as the casting cost, and then exile it to do the same thing again. But you can only do that ability if you control no creatures and only during your turn. Like the other commander decks, we have a special saga in here. This one is Birth of the Imperium. At 5 mana, on the first turn you create a 2/2 Astartes Warrior Space Marine with Vigilance for each opponent you have. On the second turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and on the third turn, you draw 2 cards for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. And if you're playing this deck right, you should pretty much always have more creatures than your opponents. We've got a few board wipes in here as well. Hour of Reckoning, 7 mana sorcery with Convoke, so you can tap your creatures in order to help pay for the mana cost, and it destroys all non-token creatures. Very powerful in this deck. Fell the Mighty is a 5 mana sorcery that destroys all creatures with power greater than target creature's power, and this uses a lot of small tokens, 1/1s, 2/2s, so you can very quickly wipe out, again, everything other than your tokens, pretty much. And then there's Exterminatus, which is a pretty crazy card. 7 mana sorcery that gets rid of Indestructible on your opponent's non-land permanents until end of turn, and then destroys all non-land permanents. And we got some other creatures with useful abilities. The Primaris Eliminator here, 5 mana for a 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you can choose one of 2 abilities. Executioner Round destroys target creature, and Hyperfrag Round gives all creatures target player controls -2/-2 until end of turn. So you can either wipe out a bunch of small things or kill one big thing. The Calidus Assassin is a 6 mana 3/3 with Flash, and it's a Shapeshifter Assassin. Its ability Polymorphine allows you to destroy a creature, and then this basically becomes a clone of it. The Grey Knight Paragon is 5 mana for a 4/4 with Flash, and this one is able to destroy target attacking creature, and if it's a demon, you exile it instead. The Grey Knights are known to be demon killers. Some more single target removal here. Mortify is a 3 mana instant to destroy target creature or an enchantment. Utter End is a 4 mana instant to exile target non-land permanent. And Swords to Plowshares, a nice reprint here. 1 white mana to exile target creature, and its controller gains life equal to the power. There haven't been many counterspells in these commander decks, but the Sisters of Silence here, 5 mana for a 3/3 with Flash, allows you to counter target instant, sorcery, activated ability, or triggered ability. Deny the Witch is a 4 mana instant that allows you to counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and its controller loses life equal to the number of creatures you control. Not bad at all. And we got a number of cards that can buff all of your forces. If you're making lots of tokens, obviously you want to make them stronger, right? So the Thunderwolf Cavalry is 5 mana for a 4/4 with First Strike, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control, which is pretty crazy. I do not like the thought of having to put +1/+1 counters on tokens, but it is a very powerful ability. The Primaris Chaplain is 4 mana for a 3/3 with Battlecry, which gives +1/+0 to all other attacking creatures when this guy attacks. He also gains Indestructible whenever he attacks. Possibly the most popular catchphrase of the Space Marines, and they shall know no fear. 2 mana instant, you choose a creature type, and creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+0 and Indestructible until end of turn. For the Emperor, a 4 mana sorcery that gives creatures you control +2/+2, Vigilance, and Lifelink until end of turn. The Flesh is Weak. This is an interesting one. It's a 5 mana enchantment which puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control when it enters the battlefield, and then all of those creatures with +1/+1 counters on them count as artifacts. And then it gives non-artifact creatures -1/-1. So creatures you play after you play this, that are not artifacts, will actually get the debuff. But it can be pretty brutal against pretty much anything, except for Necrons. It's not going to do much against Necrons. Now, funny note, this thing can actually kill Karn the Betrayer, because he's a 5/1. The Sisters of Battle also have some good representation in this deck, with a few powerful abilities that can return things from the graveyard. Celestine, the Living Saint, is a 5-mana 3/4 with flying and lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step on your turn, you can return target creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. It's a pretty strong ability. We got the Hospitaller, a 6-mana for a 3/2, and when she enters the battlefield, you can return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then you gain life equal to its mana value. It can be very good. The Sister Repentia is 5-mana for a 5/1, and when it dies, you gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. It also has Miracle for 1 white and 1 black. If it's the first card you draw, you can play it for 2 mana. And then there's the Triumph of Saint Catherine. There's a massive model on the tabletop. It's 5-mana for a 5/5 with lifelink, and an interesting ability that when it dies, you exile it, and the top 6 cards of your library, you shuffle them, and then you put it back on top of your library. So you'll draw it again and get to play it over and over. And it also has Miracle for 2, so you can play it for 2 mana over and over. We got the Rogue Trader here. It's a 4-mana for a 3/3. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can choose a card in their graveyard, and that player can return it to their hand, and then that player chooses a card in your graveyard, and it comes back to the battlefield. So an interesting sort of trade going on there. We got the Assault Intercessor, 3-mana for a 3/2 with First Strike and Menace, and Chainsword is his ability apparently. Whenever a creature an opponent dies, that player loses 2 life. Pretty solid. Getting to some of the big dudes here, the Redemptor Dreadnought. This is 5-mana for a 4/4. Now when you play it, you can also exile a creature from your graveyard. It also has Trample. And when it attacks, if you did exile a card, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. And here we got the Night Paladin, which is 5-mana for a 6/6 vehicle with Trample and Crew 1. Rapid Fire Battle Cannon deals 4 damage to each opponent when it comes into play. The Reaver Titan is 7-mana for a 10/10 vehicle. It is a pretty goofy looking model, but it's a very powerful card. Void Shields gives it protection from mana value 3 or less. So nothing that costs 3 or less, including tokens and stuff, which cost 0, can harm this thing or even target it. Gatling Blaster deals 5 damage to each opponent whenever this thing attacks, and you can crew it for 4. Then we got Bastion Protector. I believe this is a reprint, 3-mana for a 3/3, and they based it off of the Crusader model. Pretty nice. This one gives commander creatures you control +2/+2 and indestructible, so super good in a commander deck. We've also got the Vexilus Praetor, 4-mana for a 3/4 with Flash and Vigilance, and this guy just gives your commander protection from everything, which is amazing. And then we got possibly the derpiest looking Space Marine model, the Space Marine Scout. The artwork on this card looks so much better. That's 3-mana for a 2/1 with First Strike and Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you can get a Plains onto the battlefield tapped. So solid ability for the beginning of the game. And then we got the Cybernetica Datasmith. This is kind of an odd one. It's a 3-mana for a 0/1 with protection from robots. And then its ability can actually help out another player. You pay 1 blue and tap it to make target player draw a card, and then another target player gets a 4/4 robot that can't block. So I'm not sure. It's kind of a really weird ability, but I guess if you're playing with like 2 or more other players, and maybe one person's just dominating, you can sort of team up with like another player and be like, okay, do you want a card or do you want a creature? We got a little more card draw in here. Reconnaissance Mission. It's a 4-mana enchantment, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Because this deck creates lots of tokens, you should be able to get some damage coming through, just by sheer numbers. We got Skull Clamp, a reprint but a very useful card in this token deck. 1 mana, gives equipped creature +1/-1, and when it dies you draw 2 cards. And then we got the Golden Throne, a legendary artifact, 4 mana, and if you would lose the game, instead exile this card and your life total becomes 1. So it can save you 1 time. And then the second ability, 1,000 souls die every day. You can tap this and sacrifice a creature to add 3 mana in any combination of colors. We got some more mana producing artifacts, Mind Stone and the Talismans, and I accidentally put the Skull Clamp in there, but I think there's a third talisman that's supposed to be in that spot. We also got Arcane Signet and Commander Sphere with some Imperial themed artwork. Soul Ring and Everflowing Chalice as well. And then we get into the lands Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, and Exotic Orchard, which were in the other decks. We've got Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds as well for some land fetching. We've got Arcane Sanctum, which you can tap for 3 colors. And then we got a bunch of dual lands, like Darkwater Catacombs, Sky Cloud Expanse, Port Town, Prairie Stream, Scoured Barrens, and Tranquil Cove. We've also got an Ash Barrens and a Memorial to Glory, which you can sacrifice to create 2 soldiers. And then the islands, plains, and swamps, of course, have the 40k themed artwork as well. So that is it for this commander deck. Again, when I first heard that they were making 40k themed commander decks, and I saw, I think one of the first cards they previewed were some of the Space Marines, I was just like, this feels so wrong. But after seeing this deck as a whole, I think they did a really nice job. It looks like a whole lot of fun. All of the commander decks, in fact, look like a lot of fun to play, especially against each other. And I think in terms of theme, they did a good job of choosing a lot of artwork that actually feels like it fits within the world of Magic. Like, they actually avoided using a lot of guns. I mean, a few of them do appear in this deck, but a lot of the cards, you know, they're holding like hand weapons, like swords and stuff, so it doesn't feel too out of place. So I'm really happy with the way that these commander decks have shaped up, and I'm really looking forward to playing all 4 of them. I think it's actually also a good way to introduce Magic players to the world of Warhammer. So let me know what your thoughts are on this or any of the other commander decks. But thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.